working agile. So Nora, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would. I'm also a big fan of organizational learning, so I would definitely emphasize that point. And the second one, one that I would like to add, and I think we also heard that in one of the talks we had before in the knowledge session with ski data, is the point of a certain patience that is needed, because you, I think they two go together very well, because you need some time to learn, and it cannot be the idea to have to see results like OKR, all the effects kicking in after a first cycle, for example, or even after also. So you need a certain patience and this culture of, I don't want to call it failure culture all the time, which is, I think, a part as well, but a learning culture, I would say, definitely to be open to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the most cited phrases in introducing OKR is OKR is a journey. And I think that's exactly the case. And I feel like, yeah, that's a great point, that you need kind of like that resilience to see through till the end, because things are going to be very exciting for a while, and then it's going to go down. And then you need to like find the plateau of hope to actually make sure that we know this is getting better, and it's just basically growing pains that we have.
Yeah, hopefully it's more exciting in the beginning. It can also bring up a lot of interesting questions, because you're challenging the status quo in a company. So a lot of friction can also come up. So it's not necessarily all gloomy and everything in the beginning. So you need to also have the patience to go through that. And then also focus. So sometimes it helps to have something like OKRs for OKR. Why do you actually want to introduce that in the first place? So you also start with why in that process. And then you have an idea where you're going with this, and why all the pain potentially.
Yeah, that's still one of the interesting things. Every time we start working with a new customer, we ask the question, why do you even want to introduce OKRs? And then people start to think, oh, wait, why do we actually want to do that? And you need a very good storyline around it to kind of like sink in, and for people to understand, why do I have to like change my behavior, and what is the reason behind that? What a good segue to a second question. Can you give concrete examples of behavioral changes? So actual things that practices, things that really people did differently. You have examples for what changed after OKRs were introduced. Maybe Nora.
Yes, I do have some. So one that I absolutely love to see is when you do have a focus, and when you do have a goal that really excites, and you really want to reach that, you feel this motivation, as you said, from the team to really want to achieving that goal. And maybe you see that, okay, we are getting to the end of the cycle, and maybe we have some time left, and we see, okay, we might not reach everything, but then you see people really swarming around maybe one or two of the OKRs to really fulfill them and give the best to do that. So really this team play that is included here, and to put all the strengths that we have together. And I think this is something that even helps stuff like team building as well, because you really have to work together to get this thing done, and then to be really happy about it, and like, wow, we made it. So yeah, this is one behavior I love to see with OKRs.
Yeah, I like that thought, because we always talk about OKRs in terms of providing focus, in terms of like, we only set 3 OKRs, and less about like, if we see that we need to prioritize during the cycle, maybe there's 1 or 2 we need to focus on, and we need to like rally all our strength around. And that, yeah, I agree, that probably is a good team building mechanism as well.
Yeah, I would definitely say the question of focus. I also had another team or management team where I was mirroring. Okay, we started one cycle with 17 goals that you were going for, and now it then became 19. Now you want to go with 21. So is it actually a focus exercise that you're doing here? And I identified that in that case, the idea was we want to have OKRs that somehow cover every team. So everybody can find themselves in these OKRs, but that's not really the focus exercise then as a company. So where do you want to go as a company? And maybe if some teams cannot really contribute to this quarter, maybe they can already look at the next quarter and see and find something there. And if they don't really find anything there, I mean, there are some exceptions, maybe if you're a platform team, but it really raises some questions. Is the cut of how we structures our team, is that goal-oriented in our company? And so some changes might come as a result of that. And so that was one of the major changes. Another thing that I had was that people before, I was working with a globally distributed startup with people who are not always in the same area. And they tried the OKR sit in the first time, and they said like, okay, I'm just looking at the numbers, and it says like, okay, I have to call 50 dentists and get feedback from them, and I'm just following those numbers. And you really have to focus on the objective above that. So, okay, what do I actually want to get? I want to get feedback that's constructive, that helps me develop where I'm going. And so it's like, you, as a company, you don't focus only on the numbers anymore, but also why do you want to achieve that? And you ask that question. And especially during the pandemic, sometimes I had another team that was working on a website and said like, yeah, we want to increase our organic traffic. So paid advertisement should be lowered a little bit. Then COVID came and then paid advertisement was stopped. And then suddenly organic traffic was 100%, but still they didn't really achieve their goal. And so you maybe look at that and question yourself and focus a little bit more on the objective and the why. And that is really also another transition that I saw in several of the teams.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned as well is that you start thinking differently about metrics and what they actually mean. And today I had a conversation with one of our product managers who said like, well, we measure things and it's good when I start measuring them, but then we realize maybe that's not the impact we actually want to have. So, and that itself is like an iterative process. So the thing I hate most is when teams like beat themselves up saying we have the wrong metrics. And like not understanding that that's entirely normal and that's everybody needs to go through that journey, but because maybe then the topic changes and we need different metrics. And yeah, kind of like understanding that this is, even though we are like an OKR company, we also are still on that journey and we also have to learn, and it's not like we are above like learning now. So yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't give you all the solutions, but it helps you to ask the right questions.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. Any concrete behaviors that you want to share that you observed in IKEA?
Yeah, it makes me really happy when the OKRs helped about cross-collaboration. When you really realize that, oh, let's have OKRs about a topic, come together like that. Or when you realize that we have to collaborate more across functions or across countries and so on. So that's one. And then I also have noticed more and more that OKRs can come into the team development area as well. So it's not only about the business that you want to achieve or the outcomes for the business, but also maybe the outcomes for the team. So how is our team performing? And then it can really become valuable there. How do we need to work together better as a team to perform better on our business goals?
Yeah, I think I like that thought, because it's not only about like developing, like being better at OKRs, but also like being better at working together better as a team, a bit to the point that Nora also had. So yeah, really like that. So let's talk about challenges now. What are like the main cultural challenges that you have seen so far? Maybe Felix, do you want to start?
So one of the things I would say is that sometimes management sees it as another tool that is just used for operations, but they don't need to change any of the working style, how they set strategy or any of that kind of stuff. And they still get to keep all the babies. And in OKRs, I think there's a big part of reasoning. Why do you think this will be successful? Or like provide sometimes numbers with this as well. And ideally, also if you go to key result or maybe also KPI, it's that it's not just gut feeding; those are concrete numbers. And that is definitely a mind shift, and people should be willing to accept that and to act on that. And that sometimes means, yeah, that you say, okay, you also have to lead by example and really go into that. And then as a company, that is one of the major challenges, I would say. And at the same time, I think OKRs has a good point to address the point of trust. Because if you say in Agile, sometimes people say, okay, we maybe work in the Scrum framework as a team. Up there we have the strategy, and how do we communicate clearly actually that what comes from the top is understood at the bottom and the results come back up. And I would say it's interesting for me that you can say with OKRs, if they're really to the point, you have easy transparency because you can so easily describe what you're going for. And that creates trust over time as well, which is sometimes needed in some companies to really reap the benefits of that, but it's also a good starting point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like especially the fact that you address like the leadership culture, because there's so much good intention out there. There's so many reasons where I talk to leaders who are like authentically want to have OKRs to have more focus and to have more empowerment. But sometimes we just need to translate that for them. Like, what exactly do I have to do differently? What behavioral change? There we go again. What behavioral change do we have? Like, how do I need to work differently? And then there's the, I have a high, let's say I see a high importance of coaches as well on the leadership level. Let's say like, well, we're on a good track. You as a leader want to be more empowering and want to leave people more space. So maybe in this and that situation, you need to consider behaving differently. And I think that's kind of what it goes down to, because we all talk about culture, but we have to like talk about like behaviors and actual practices that we need to change, I think. So back to the challenges. Linda, What have you seen so far?
Yeah, I think coming from retail, it's very much about output. So, you know, do fast and yeah, produce a lot of stuff. So to go from output to outcome, that is a big change that you have to practice on thinking that way. And yes, we did a lot of stuff, but why did we do it? So I think that one is one of the challenges.
And how you're trying to tackle that one?
Talk about it. You know, dig deeper into, because it becomes more meaningful when you have the why, right? And so to talk about that and to make teams realize that you're doing a lot of stuff to get somewhere. So it's not that it's pointless. It's just to sort of summarize it and bundle it to explain why.
Because that's also tricky, because OKRs are, maybe I'm daring too much now, but are more or less pointless if we use it for output, because we already do that. We do Scrum, we do like project management. And I can't blame teams to that say like OKR is senseless if they don't have a quality level or like an outcome level that makes OKR make sense as well. So yeah, that is definitely a challenge. Nora, last but not least.
Yeah, I can perfectly add on to that. Maybe just give it another name, like this featureitis stuff. So I think OKR can show you that maybe you are very in love with solutions. So I sometimes, when I'm working with teams, I see that they have certain solutions in their mind that are, I mean, of course, they believe in it and they, yeah, when we do this, that would be great and stuff. And then we begin to kind of build objectives around these solutions that are already there. And this is actually not the way, you know, not the way to be around. So I think this is like a symptom that you see and that you might have to overcome. And you were just saying, what do you do about it? I mean, sometimes it's even good to maybe for one cycle go with it and see what it brings. And in the end, and this is where the learning comes into play, to see maybe we picked the wrong feature or didn't do what we actually expected and so on. So maybe then do it the other way around again.
Get them to experience the effect of it, of not testing the hypothesis. But then again, it's kind of hard to do that, because you kind of always, you are an expert in your field and you think, I know my customer. And then you have to, at the same time, always like take a step back and be like, well, maybe I don't know exactly what's the right solution. And I have to like test that as well and have that, I don't know, that humility somehow to be like, well, maybe I don't know everything. So yeah, I get that.
And I would say at some point it also helps you to dig deeper into what do we actually stand for as a company. If you also work in retail, it's like if you only focus on numbers, then you will always be potentially behind the competition. But if you say this is really the core of what we're doing and what we stand for customers, and it's easier to take also potentially moonshots on that, which I would not start with in the beginning. There's the trust question as well, and that is also trust in yourself as a team if you start with that framework. But really to dig deeper and say like, okay, what do we stand for as a company? And that's usually an automatical process that I would see, which comes after some time. Not necessarily, but that helps reap the biggest benefits if you have clarity that the teams can derive from what they're paying in for.
Definitely, yeah. So next question, how was the introduction of the OKRs perceived in your department? Maybe Nora, do you want to?
I can tell a little story around that. That was from the first company I worked with, this insurance company, the department I was working in. We were, not really full-blown implementing it like everything, but the manager that we had at that time, she was very curious to see what it's all about, what is OKR, and so. And yeah, so I was part of one of the teams. So I was not the coach, but I was experiencing it as a team member. And so I can say it was pretty new to have goals at all, I have to say, on that in that team. And we were allowed, as OKR is also saying it, to come up with our own ideas for the goals. And that was something like, wow, okay, that's super cool. And the team lead we had at that time, he was pretty new in the company. It was actually his first day when we were asked to draft the OKRs. So with this, we really had a really good effect of like instantly having a team building, ceremony, so to say, by drafting our own objectives for like a bit for the year, but then of course more specifically for the next month. So this this drafting part was already a good team building thing that was perceived very, very well. And it gave us a huge motivation at the start, I would say, but also throughout the time when we were visualizing the OKRs, refining them a bit more, and then of course also all the time checking where are we, what comes next, and where do we have to again bundle our strengths to reach the stuff and so on. That was giving us a huge motivation and also an outlook, like a direction. I think this really glued us together very well, like better than any team event that we could possibly have had.
Very interesting. I know I have coached teams that almost fell apart in the drafting, to be completely honest, but maybe you had a good coach. But that's also, I think that's a nice touch to it, that there are also like positive kind of like reports of it, because what we usually hear, like, OKRs are hard, OKRs take long, why are we even doing this? So it's nice that you also have like positive experiences around that. Felix, what about you?
Sometimes a little bit mixed. If the team didn't have the impression that the management was on board, they had they were a little bit scared to say, like, what do we want, or what do we stand for as a team? Like, I'm exposing myself, and then first of all, I'm not really delivering on it because the culture doesn't really allow for that. But then I'm maybe making a fool out of myself. So why should I do the first step in the first place? So then, therefore, management buy-in to say, like, we support you and we would like to take that seriously is then helpful. Otherwise, the team is sometimes maybe a little bit too scared to really set up something like that. But also in other contexts, teams get positive feedback. Like, how can it be that you hold your focus for more than 2 weeks, you know? Because otherwise management always says, like, go left, go right, changing in the wind. And at least that helps keeping focus, because that's also commitment from the other side. So that's already positive feedback that you're getting. And then sometimes you get challenges like, where do we get our correct numbers? Like, okay, it's another department. Oh, then you have to pay for that data. You start raising those questions, and then maybe see, okay, it's hard in the beginning, but then it helps if you really have coaches and maybe also management support that, and then you can really get the ball rolling, and then it can really be an empowerment tool.
Yeah, I agree. And there, I always feel like reprioritizing and daring to ask for management to, like, so what do I do now? Things have changed. How can I reprioritize my capacity? I think that's one of the most empowering things about OKR. Like, you actually think about how much time do I have, and then you go back and feel like, well, did I spend my time in the way that I want to? And if, of course, like, sometimes the board of directors, or the board just says, like, you have to do this, but what we do not then, like, what else do we drop? I think that's a very important question that many teams can't dare to ask because they don't have any proof. They say, like, oh, we're 140% booked, but who's, like, proving that, you know? And you need to have some sort of basis through the OKR, and maybe even through capacity management.
Yeah, just also remember PO, who was not really burning for his product, and he was more managing things, and like, for him it was a job to get money, but not really to follow his passion. And I think some of these things that might also make clear, but then you have to find a way to deal with that for that person, right? Because it's exposing that and potentially job threatening. It's like, okay, how do you deal with that? All the kind of stuff has to be considered as well. But I think it's helpful for that person, maybe, because it seems that person's happy, and also maybe helpful for the company. But that's ask the critical questions once again.
Yeah, I feel like transparency can be scary sometimes as well. And we have to keep that in mind, because some cultures are just not built for that. But we can, like, find mitigating practices to make sure that people actually feel safe enough to actually share and nail down with, like, numbers what they actually want to achieve next cycle. So yeah, we're already at our last question. A very good question. What would you have done differently? What are your biggest learnings from your OKR introductions? Maybe for Linda, this is a very easy question because she was not involved in the initial introduction of OKRs, but what do you see could have been done differently from your perspective right now?
No, I think we're learning all the time. That's the exciting thing with OKRs. And I think where we are now is really about usability over perfection. To really lower the bar. Often people, they want to do the right thing. They want to follow, all the things. It has to be these 3 things in the objectives, and then this many objectives, and then that many key results, and they should be like this and that. And then it can be very, very scary to sign off because there's so many things that can go wrong. So here really to encourage the teams to just try and do your best and then to learn. So really lower the bar in the organization, I think, is a big learning. And also what Skidata was talking about, to not become too overly theoretical and starting to go into that hole of over theory and too much handbook things and too much to read. Then it only feels harder. The longer the handbook is, the harder it feels to do it.
Yeah, I can agree on that. And especially sometimes it's a matter of like, I know all the theory, but what's the practice? What do I do now in these situations? And we've started to do more like after the trainings, we started to do more like feedback sessions as well with IKEA, and that we really see like the fruits of that people actually get to, I understood the theory, but what does it mean for me now? So going in and not only doing trainings, but also having kind of a journey afterwards. That's what I would see from our like work path perspective, understanding that it's not just knowing something, but also knowing how to apply it.
Yeah, and how happy you can see that the teams are when they nail it. It's so nice to see that when they really feel, oh no, we have something to work. Let's start to use this one now.
Or they didn't rip us apart in the feedback sessions. That's always a good thing to see. So maybe going down to Nora, what would you have done differently in the OKR introductions that you have seen or that you have accompanied yourself?
Yeah, first of all, again, I want just to highlight again what Linda was saying before, because when I compare the story that I was just telling about me as a team member of this team in the insurance company, where we had this very lightweight OKR trial, I would say, that was far from being very well, drafted and very well formulated and so on. We basically started at such a low level that we were even happy to have such 3 months goals at all, and some measurements with it. And so I want to support that, lowering the bar depending from where you're starting from, of course. But then I think it's better to see the effects, even if they are not like formulated super well, but you see the good effects, and then you have the motivation to go on and do the harder part, maybe the nitty-gritty part, how it was said earlier. So I just want to emphasize that. Another thing that I would be curious about, to be honest, I haven't seen that so far, but to get the OKR structure maybe a bit away of the organizational structure. So I've also seen it like going like OKRs, defining it down from like at a certain organizational structure. So from, I don't know, departments down to teams, down to so on. And then also on a horizontal level, and that might lead to confusion if you're doing it like all of these just following the structures. So maybe move on to more of these virtual teams. And so maybe a learning could be, or an idea to try out could be to really think about where do we actually have to gather people around, and then with independence to the organizational structure. And I think this is a nice thing to try out. I haven't done it so far, I have to say, but I would be interested to have some talks with anyone who had some learnings on that already. But I think that's a good development of the whole thing.
Yeah, when we work with customers that don't have let's say just a normal structure, a simplified organizational chart, so to say, but work more like in metric structures, we always ask the question, where is the value being created? And maybe that's in several instances. Maybe we have like a UX research group that actually wants to set OKRs in there to improve their practice. But at the same time, they work in like product teams where they have to maybe own a key result that kind of like measures the effect of all the UX efforts. So I think that's always a good question to ask, like, where is the value being created? And I know Felix is very passionate about the topic, so I will let him talk as well.
Yeah, I've been passionate about several topics in the past. And for me, one of the points was also when introducing OKRs and trying to scale that, make sure that you also have management on board somehow. Like we were pitching as agile coaches that we want to try OKR and there's several benefits that you can have. And they say like, sure, let's do it. Let's go for it. And at some point we were like, okay, so what should we optimize for now? What should we focus on? And management says like, oh, you do that. We were wondering like, that's the job of management. Can we discuss like, why do you see OKRs might be interesting? What you want to get out of that? And said like, okay, we can have a discussion on that, but please don't start from scratch. Like we don't want to invest too much time in that. So I figured then in the end, you should really do it in the beginning, that you also say, what does management want to get out of that? So you also have it aligned with their interests and that kind of stuff, because otherwise later in the process, it might become a little bit more difficult. And then also, I mean, there was a point of talking too much and not getting started. For me, it was also getting started maybe with too much. So I would not necessarily say, okay, all your initiatives should be hypothesis driven in the beginning. That can also be like too overwhelming for some teams to really get going. Although it might be practical, there's too much theory behind it to understand it once, and then it's too much of a challenge. Yeah, there are several cases where I see like it might be a benefit if you are more mature. You can try several different things, also like reducing the levels of OKR hierarchy, so to speak. I mean, in the end, the idea is to reduce the overhead, right? And the more clarity you have, why you want to do it, how each teams have synergies and are paying into each other, and how you can iteratively improve, that then ideally keeps it low.
Yeah, and maybe adding on to that, we want to reduce the kind of like the overhead, but in the end, I think one of the things that in my experience is the biggest pitfall is to say OKRs are not more work. OKRs don't cost anything. OKRs are not more work, because that's usually sets a wrong precedent, because that kind of like implies leadership. You don't have to be trained like coaches. You don't have to change your behavior, and you don't have to spend time on something. So in the beginning, OKRs will take time, and I think that's something that people don't realize that much, and they just feel like, oh, let's just do a bit of OKRs. That doesn't work. We need to like, it's a change. It's a cultural change. It's a process change, and I think that's an awareness that yeah, some leaders just don't have in the beginning, and the teams also don't have. But I think the best answer for that is like, if it makes sense, if the why, if the outcome that we're aiming for with the OKR process is there, and we can measure if we got there, leading back to your OKR about the OKR process practice. If we can validate that, I think then it's a successful change for the entire company. Any questions from the audience?
All right. So I have sometimes the feeling that culture change is mainly driven by middle management. But I also have the feeling that it's sometimes very, very critical or a lot of effort to change middle management behaviors. Also, if you have someone on top management level, a board member, for example, want to really change something, and but the directs of that board member, they're so used to how they worked a long time before, and also want to promote themselves when they have FaceTime with the management. And then it's not about really talking what they have learned and what went wrong. It's about just stating how great they are, how great their teams are, how great their departments are, how great their units are. And I think about how do you really change that work of these middle management that are, for me, the most important part of making OKRs world on the long run.
So I'm not necessarily sure if middle management needs to be a driver in this, but they should definitely on board. And you should also definitely have them in mind if you say, okay, what is the future perspective for that person in that process? That you say like, okay, there is actually something in it for them, because if you say you empower the teams maybe a little bit more, I mean, power shifts from the top to the bottom, and a lot of people, if they are afraid of not having power in the end anymore, it can be a real threat to them if they're a little bit more status driven. So I see management in general to have a little bit more of a directional, like, okay, where does the entire company want to go position, but that might be a little bit more higher level management. But then maybe try some where could innovation take place, or how can we actually make things happen which are a little bit more difficult at the moment. Like teams want to try some moonshots, and as a middle manager, you can say, how can I make that moonshot more of a reality? How can I support those teams? And then I can shine together with the team, because I know that they themselves don't have the leverage to make that possible. That could be an idea to address that.
I might also add one point to what you just said. I mean, maybe you should also ask yourself, like, why is this management behaving like this? I mean, is it fear? Is it, I don't know, I mean, Felix said, status driven, yes. But I mean, we are all motivated by different things. And if it's the fear component, then maybe you again have to work with the management of these guys to tell them, okay, encourage your directs, encourage your people to talk about possible failures and learnings and so on, and show them that nothing will happen. I mean, they will not lose their jobs or whatever. So yeah, I would see which are the where are the leverages and where does this behavior come from, and then.
Yeah, the SCARF model can help with this. The status, certainty, ambiguity, that kind of stuff.
Did that answer your question? Shadow moderator, but yeah. So hi, my name is Bala. I come from a company called Zeiss. I have 2 questions. The first question is, I have a team member who says, I don't care about your strategies, whatever it is, just tell me, I'll do it, okay? So how are you going to motivate that person, like, you know, to buy into this whole OKR framework? Sorry? No, I want to know the answer. What should I do actually? Like,
so we just had the point from the audience that, is it so bad? Does everybody has to pay into the company strategy? Does everybody need to be interested in that? So just to repeat, so for the people at home. And I think what I would do is, so one thing is that nobody has to take part in this process. I agree with that, but at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, what do we lose if those people don't take part in this? We lose their intelligence, their insights, their kind of like the juicy stuff that they know that would help us create better OKRs. So in the first instance, I involve them to a certain degree and just ask them, like, if you could decide what the team should focus on in the next quarter, what 3 things would you say are important? And then maybe these 3 things end up in the OKRs in the end. And then you can kind of like, they see that, okay, I'm being heard, because there's also a reason why they say that. So either it's like professional culture. I see that a lot of like with like engineers that say like, you do that, the business people and product people should tell me what to do and just build it. But maybe if they start seeing that they can actually pitch in and that they're being seen, that can already help to change the behavior a bit.
Yeah, I would also say people have different motivations, and for some it might just be that they say, this is an awesome team and I like the familiarity and I like to get something done with this team no matter what it is. And in general, OKR, you should start with the people who are willing to experiment, who want to go in that direction, and that at some point the passion that ideally these people develop will be contagious, and then other people say also want to be part of a working culture that's so based on laughing, also on achieving stuff where people feel good. Usually people want to be part of that, and then that drags those people in the end. Yeah, but don't impose it on them and say like, you must do that all the time. Start with those who are willing, and then the rest should follow ideally.
And sometimes it's even the fact that somebody else gets to pitch in an idea that then gets to be in an OKR, or they see like other people chip in with their ideas and they're being heard. Why am I not doing that? So I've seen the effect that offering them just pitch in what you want, and others who actually are on board from the team get to be in the drafting session. And then they maybe hear like that's actually a good thing, and it's nice to be involved and be asked, because sometimes it's just like, well, you never asked me before, why are you asking me now? That kind of attitude, and that can be kind of like lifted by these kind of like 2 ways. One, like showing that it's like betting on the enthusiasts, and on the other hand, like giving the space to high, like very, very low fidelity involvement in the process.
I don't know, but it's not mandatory that I have to convince everyone to participate. I can also let go 1 or 2 guys if they don't want to participate.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's only creating, I don't know, mayhem in the drafting, then of course I would always explore like, why are they behaving this way? Because nobody behaves this way just out of ill will. There must be a reason for it. But I'm also, I don't know, I cite that quote a lot. Maybe some of you have heard that before, but I actually had an engagement with a discussion with an engineer who says like, if you think that I should know the value of my job, then you're crazy. That's business people job. And if you have a person like that, I don't know how to convince him. Like, it's also not, maybe just like leave him out, give him the chance to like chip in. But if it doesn't work, then.
Thank you. And I have one more follow-up question, actually. So I'm an agile guy. So I work with Scrum, Kanban, Safe, Less, whatever it is. Now we have another framework, which is called OKR. So we have cycles of sprints, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then we have PI planning cycles, 3 weeks, 3 months or whatever it is. Now we have OKR cycles. One question I'm asking myself, like, we already know the amount of time what we spend in meetings, roughly around 20% for sprint, for Scrum. Now, if you put Safe in on top of it to scale, so we are spending another 20%. Now OKR comes into picture, it takes another 10, 15%. So what are we trying to achieve by engaging our employees 55% of them, of their time on meetings and only 45% on work? Maybe I'm exaggerating the percentages, but yeah. So, but I really want to honestly ask, like, myself, am I doing something right? Are we here to do meetings, or are we here to solve the problems in the world and create a good purpose for everyone who is living in Earth? So that's something which I always ask. So wanted to ask the panel also here.
Yeah, maybe I can jump on that. I'm with you. I can perfectly understand your question, and maybe the question of your team members. I can imagine. And what I'm always a big fan of, or not, what I'm not a big fan of is, you put another, for example, framework or whatever, or be it also another meeting, like a single meeting. You just put it on top of what you already have, and then it's piling up with more meetings, more time, and so on. So I'm more a fan of, okay, there's something new, for example, OKR or whatever you want to newly introduce. And then you have a look, okay, what is actually already there, considering meetings, for example. And then you have a smart way of integrating that and not just putting it on top. So it's not like blindly, okay, we have this and that meetings on top of the meetings that we already have, but can we, for example, combine some of the meetings because they have a similar direction, like more taking a step back and say, why are we having these meetings? What is the value of these meetings? And then can we somehow, how can we, like a piece of a puzzle, how can we integrate that into our puzzle so far? So where does it fit in? What do we maybe have to take out? Maybe we do not need one meeting anymore and we replace it with something else. So here I like to have like a smart and a clever integration of the meetings by taking a first look, what is the value of each meeting, and then see if you maybe can combine it. For example, with Scrum and OKR, for example, I think there you can have some nice, say, overlaps where you can say we can take a few things together. That's an example.
And I think it's also a matter of like, if you have too many meetings in general, maybe that's something you need to change as well. That's something that we did when we used the first time we started using capacity management. We actually were so surprised by how much time we actually spend in like recurring meetings. And that's the first like lever you can like take to say like, does everybody always have to be in the same meetings? And that's such a huge lever in terms of capacity planning as well. And yeah, maybe that's also an indicator of like OKRs sometimes brings things to the surface that have nothing to do with OKRs, but that need to maybe have some change in them as well.
Yeah, and then maybe also ask, why do we attend meetings in the first place? Might it be, oh, I've been invited as optional, and say like, okay, then by default I come, but you're not really thinking like, should I join or not? Is it that people say, okay, we have to book 100% of our time that we're using into some time account or another, and meetings are more easily to book than other work I'm doing? So that might be like, I default, I go to meeting whenever I can because that's the easiest for time booking. Then like, what's your idea? Are you afraid of missing out if you don't attend a meeting? Like ask, what is really the culture? Why you attend meetings in the company in the first place? And then see, could that meeting have been an email? Is there another way of having an information radiator at the beginning of the building when you enter that? Or also an online one that you say like the most accurate stats, I can get that somewhere else and I don't need a meeting for that.
Maybe even the OKR can help to decide which meetings to go to, because if you have 3 really strong focus points for this next workshop, then it can help you to take out a lot of meetings that is not contributing to those OKRs.
So you have a key result. We want to reduce the number of our meetings, and you have KPIs to say like, okay, the quality in our work should not drop somewhere. So the combination that might work.
That is a great last advice. I'm sorry, we have to wrap things up now. And yeah, I wanted to thank you for participating and for sharing all your knowledge with us, and also to the audience for your great questions. And yeah, I hope you have some food for thought that you can take home or to the next sessions. And yeah, thanks a lot.